Welcome to the Peerless YouTube channel. I am Katie North, and today we'll be painting a butterfly. I broke this video up into two separate videos. So the first one, we are going to be painting the butterfly with the regular Peerless watercolors. And in the second video, which will come out in a few days, we are going to be using the same butterfly, but adding the liquid metallics and the Peerless gold sheets. So if you don't have them, you'll be able to do the first one, but you absolutely are probably going to want to buy them because the butterfly turns out amazing and it completely morphs and changes into this whole living thing, and it's amazing. I will try to get the best video of the shimmer and sparkle, but it blows me out of the water when it's like in person, so I hope you like it. For your supplies, you will be needing Peerless watercolor, watercolor brush and paper, a fine tip artist pen, a pencil, double-sided tape, scissors, a butterfly sketch, and a Lightbox. So to get started, we are going to be making our watercolor palette, and I will be cutting sheets of our Peerless colors and double-siding tape them to an extra piece of watercolor paper. So if at any point you need to stop the video and get caught up, that is completely fine. I did fast forward the video a little bit in this one just to kind of save on time, but I am going to highlight all of the sections that I do and the important parts that I think you need to focus on. And then a lot of the time when I'm actually painting, I kind of just speed it up. So keep that in mind. It is a little bit longer video and it might take you a little bit longer, but you don't necessarily have to make it as detailed as I did, because the next video when I do the metallics, some of those really detailed color areas kind of smush together anyway, so you might just kind of want to let it relax a little bit and don't get as detailed as I did. So once you are done with your palette, I have made a butterfly sketch that you guys are more than welcome to use, and I left two little lines on the side of it, and for that reason, it was because I folded it and I cut it down the center, and I actually wanted to slip it into my Peerless watercolor journal, and I'll show you in a second a little teaser, but I wanted it to make it look like it was flapping. So, and I also just want to continue working in my journal. So I'm just going to be tracing to either side with my Lightbox behind it. But if you want to take a little teaser, I wanted it to be able to do this, which I got really excited about. And I played with it probably way too much. So when you're ready, you're just going to slip it in under two sides of the journal and then trace one side first and then flip the Lightbox over to the other side of the paper. Once you have it all done in pencil, what I did find in all of my preliminary sketches and my little watercolor works when testing out the metallics is that I did not like how much the black watercolor bled into the metallics when I put them on. So I decided to use an artist pen to really darken the areas that I want to be like almost black, and it also just gives it a little bit easier of a guideline when you're working to kind of see where all of the areas are. You don't have to do this, you can kind of go in afterwards. I do know that the metallics, once they've dried, putting a black over it, they don't really stay as like crisp and sharp. They kind of bleed into the sparkles a little bit more. And then if you're trying to color it with an artist pen over it too, to kind of make some definition and some intense lines, I feel like it kind of chewed up the marker a little bit, or like the artist pen, and it didn't quite give it that sharp line that I was looking for. So doing them beforehand gives you that dark areas and a good outline while you're working. But I'm leaving most of the areas with the pencil, just so I can keep kind of working and have a little bit more of a natural look to it. But just the areas that I want black and dark, I'm doing a little cross-hatching of the artist pen. All right, so we're getting close to finishing the black outline, and I want you to take a look at the reference photo. And so for this one, we are pretty much doing three main colors, which are blue, kind of that yellow orange, and the purple. So I've picked those ones out, and I do have a little darker blue, the Alice blue, and the black just for some shadowing, but you should be able to get all of those tones by mixing each other and kind of getting the complementary tone and the secondary tones. And so when we're working on something like this, we want to pick out the lightest and the vibrant pieces, like the yellow would be the first one, and then the negative space, which is the white. So when we're working on a larger scale painting like this as well, we kind of want to work in a circular motion. So what I mean is you're going to kind of start in the left top corner and then kind of work on the right top corner and then maybe down on the bottom edges and start to build out those yellows. But don't worry about making them too dark because this is still the first wash, and you can go back through and make them a little bit darker the second time. So I'm starting up there, and you can kind of follow along with me. But yeah, if you have your reference photo conveniently next to you, I would definitely recommend printing it out. And yeah, just start working around doing that first wash of yellow. so now that first wash of yellow is on there, I'm going to be using a second wash and using some of the wet on wet techniques just to kind of give a little bit more shape and make it a little bit more of an orange versus a yellow. And then looking at the bottom of the butterfly, there's kind of like a little edge of a bright yellow. And so I'm actually doing the lifting technique with the paper towel, and that's just gonna make sure that that stays the brightest yellow right now and not having any more of those darker tones of the yellow that I'm like the second wash that I'm putting in. And it's kind of a quick way to work too, to kind of save a little bit of time. And it's just kind of extra drying, like a speed dry, I guess you would say. And then I'm just going back around to some of the areas, looking at my reference photo again, where it's more of an orange. So now those areas are getting the second coat of yellow. So now we're gonna work on the main body of the butterfly. And in the reference photo, I feel like it looks kind of fuzzy and has a lot of colors and different things going along. So what I actually wanna do is do the whole thing, the wet on wet technique. And so when you mix blue, purple, and kind of that yellowish orange, you can get varying ranges between like a grayish or a greenish silvery kind of tone. And so you can see as I'm mixing, if they're putting more blue down, it's gonna look more green. And then I put a purple down and then it gets more of like a grayish tone. And so I'm just doing the wet and wet technique, and it's just gonna be that first layer also. And that gets a lot more and different things going on later, but you can see how softer the blend is with the wet on wet technique. Okay, so once we have that main body done and that first wash, before we do the next layer, I want you to make sure all of the yellow is completely 100% dry. So the reason, if you put down a purple next to that yellow orange right there, the orange will grab into that whole pool of purple and it will kind of make it more of a muddy color. And we will definitely be using that technique in making some of those like secondary colors and shadows. But for this first area, we're just kind of blocking out where we want the purples to go and then where we want the blues to go. So just make sure if you need to pause it and let it dry, go get a cup of coffee or a glass of water, whatever you need to do. and then you can start working in those kind of block areas, also kind of going in a circular motion. And you can see right now, so now this is time when I can put the purple over the yellow and getting that kind of softer shadow, and it's still the same kind of tones that we're going for, but it's just a little bit more muted. So that is one area where you would like that to happen, but if you were to do it when it was still wet, it would kind of mush together a little too much. But as a second layer with already dry, it kind of gives it a softer look. And I guess I should say the purple, you can go over it with the purple, but if it was still wet, you would lose that area that's kind of that you want to be super, super vibrant and yellow too fast. So that's why if it's already dry, I'm able to make that secondary tone with the purple and yellow together and still have that tiny little kind of teardroppy shape under that circle, a super bright yellow. So if they were still wet, they would smush together. So now I do fill in some of the darker areas with that black, just because I know they're going to take a good 5 layers before they're a dark enough tone and not kind of like a softer watercolor look. I do want those to be pretty heavy. And so I'm kind of working in those now, knowing that I'm not going to be working next to the yellow because that yellow is already as bright as I want it to be. And we're just letting it be dark, and it's going to take a few washes to get there. And the same with the top parts of the wings of the butterfly. Those are going to be the darkest areas where they're blue. So I'm going to put a layer of the black down first just to make sure there's enough depth, so I'm not doing a bunch of layers of blue. I still will probably do about 3 layers. This is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning too, that you don't need to do as many as I originally thought, just because once I started with the metallics, like we'll show you in the next video, it'll get the metallics that we use have 3 different tones of the blue, so they have a pretty heavy blue too. But so this way is just kind of making sure that that area is a good dark first layer, so you're not having to build out a ton of layers on top of it. Okay, so again, with working with the lightest colors first, we are going to put the lightest blue in the top part of those wings and then work ourselves down into a little bit of that Alice blue and then into the black. And using a little bit of the wet on wet techniques, but definitely keeping it super light at the top. And then if I barely touch my watercolor brush into that yellow, it gives it more of that kind of aquamarine color too. And that's just kind of getting used to being able to pull from your already existing color on the page. If you're not comfortable touching the yellow and doing that, you could always mix it on the palette on the side and then start for the wet on wet technique between a light blue and then do a touch of the kind of aquamarine. And so yeah, so I'm kind of like blending the two together. So I'm working from the light blue edge and then the dark blue edge, and then kind of while it's still wet, working the 2 blues together to kind of get as much of the tone as I want of each, and then however softness. So in this, I get a little carried away with blending it. And again, once you put the metallics over it, they do kind of like spread out a little bit more, and I feel like the way that you would mix watercolors is a little different than when you would mix the metallics, because that's the sparkles inside it kind of change they probably do change the molecular structure of something, because, you know, it's all color molecules anyway. But I feel like the mixing kind of is a little bit different. So as long as you kind of do a fade from like light blue to dark blue, that's all I would honestly worry about if you plan on doing the metallics, because, you know, they smush together anyway. All that technical stuff for smushing, so. So now that I've done the other side of the wing with the main areas of blue, I will be doing a second layer of blue, kind of darkening those spots closest to the black. And then any of the areas that are kind of like a super dark blue or black on our reference photo, then I'll start to build out that second layer in those areas that will kind of give it a little bit more depth. And then bringing that blue over the winged areas where it was the yellow and then the purple washes, and now it gets a third layer of the blue. If you are not doing the metallics and just doing the butterfly, if some areas are already started to dry, you can start to add your very detailed lines, and the first ones can kind of go down now, so you follow those little pencil lines with a very skinny brush or the very tiny tip of your brush, and you can start getting some of those detailed lines now that those bigger sections have dried. But yeah, kind of just going around doing another wash, darkening those circles and any areas that you want to be a little bit darker, and then kind of letting it dry again because we will be working into that middle section again next. All right, so now we're going to be working on the inside of the wings. And so usually when I'm talking about working from the lightest to darkest, when you are working from kind of the same level or the same level of light or dark, in this one we are obviously going to be doing a purple to blue. So we're just going to have to decide which one you're going to want to put down first. So I know the purple is going to be at the top, so I'm going to start with purple and then work into the blue. And then I do kind of make like both separate sections if I want it to be like stay those colors in those areas. If I were to do purple to blue in a complete wash and have everything be super wet, it might blend together too much and it might pull into the blue. But if I have a clean brush and I put purple down and then a clean brush and I put blue down, I know both sides will stay those colors and then the blend will happen more in the middle. And then, so once I'm working down towards the orange, I do like, because if I mix the blue and the orange together, I'm going to get kind of a green. But if I mix the purple and the orange together, I get more of a neutral tone and more of like a, it's not brown. It's kind of just like if the orange was in shadow. So I do put the blue pretty close, but then when I start blending out those colors between the blue and the purple, I do kind of like a section of purple and orange mixed together. And so I want all of these little detailed lines that I am doing, I'm actually using purple as my line. And that just kind of gives it kind of more of that muted tone and more of a natural tone instead of using kind of like a brown or a black, because those tones are staying in there together and it's just kind of the same similarity but darker. again, also, if you're doing the metallics, you don't have to get as crazy as I do with all of these lines. They do blend together a little bit, but not too much. I probably would be able to get away with just doing the lines and not the little tiny like vertical ones if you're doing the metallics, but you know, it's up to you. You can go crazy on the details. I like details all the time. Way too many details, but it turns out really pretty anyway, so it's completely up to you. So now I'm basically doing my darkest wash now. So I am using almost purple, adding some black or the pearl gray, adding some Alice blue, and any of the lines in the detailed lines, which is now pretty much either my third or fourth wash in some areas, those are going to be my most detailed lines. So any of the dark areas, I'm making sure have another wash of super dark purple, just so I know that they're, you know, 4 washes in and they're gonna stay nice and dark. Any of the lines I want to build out and stay, any lines in the blue, I'm gonna use purple. And then any kind of, any little details over the orange as well, because I want it to be more of a muted tone, but still dark. So purple is going to be my majority, my line that I'm going to be used for most of my detail. And then, yeah, a really heavy line around the edge of the wings of purple. And then, yeah, we're getting pretty close to being done with this butterfly. You can kind of just follow along with me, and any amount of texture and lines and details you'd like to do is good. And yeah, I will check back in when we get almost to the end. So getting close to the end, I'm gonna do a few more washes on the body, and I'm going to be doing like a horizontal kind of line with a little bit of a curve to it, just to give it more of a round shape to the body. And still using that darker purple and just adding those last little bit of details into those really fine lines. You could definitely use like one of those super, you know, tiny brushes too if you're worried about getting those lines too big, because they do look the best when they're super gentle and, you know, tiny little lines on the inside. And then, yeah, we're getting pretty close to the end. If you do not plan on doing the metallics class, or you don't have the metallics but you're trying to order them and this, you kind of just want to do this one as a complete piece, I would recommend doing some highlights with either a gel pen or the gypsum white and adding the antennas. It's kind of just a little V shape. I will add a video of the completed with the metallics at the end of this video, just to get you excited, because I hope you do buy the metallics. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I love this butterfly. I think it's so cute with or without the metallics. But I hope to see you next time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe and share with your friends. And I will see you next time for the liquid metallics and peerless gold sheets. It's going to be amazing.